theologians have a place in imagining the possibility of a free society, of a progressive developmental society, but also a society that is inclusive and sees other humans as humans, fundamentally. Faith itself must critique and be skeptical of power in whatever formation, such that even God himself can stand against kings that he has appointed.
Welcome everybody to This and That with Brian Zikhali. I'm the aforementioned Brian Zikhali, and I hope today we'll be able to delve into the mind of a very interesting young man. Yes, he's laughing now. He's known for his laughter, but I believe there's a lot more substance to him. So I want to welcome Gakeesi and his Tlhabiwe. Yes, welcome to This and That.
Thank you very much.
And as the name goes, we're going to talk about this and that.
Yes.
I hope you are ready.
I am ready for
I know everyone is ready to hear what you have in store. Let's start by saying, what's one thing people assume about you that is absolutely wrong?
Wow. Interesting. I think something that people fail to realize or don't accept is that I'm quite shy. I seem to portray an image that I'm very extroverted, while I am at best an extroverted introvert.
Interesting. Well, maybe something else. What has been keeping you up at night lately? Is there anything that's been keeping you up at night?
A lot's been keeping me up at night. I think the number one, global affairs. I think that I would divide that into two: the global economy and global politics.
Okay.
So the fundamental question would then be, what does the future look like, not only for our generation but generations to come? So that gives me quite a bit of stress.
All right. So in the middle of all this pressure,
Yes.
do you find any joy? If anything, what gives you joy in the middle of all these pressures?
I think the beauty of life is in the small things. And sometimes the beauty of life is in the pressures. I think if there's one thing that I've come to realize, is that the process of beautification or growth often happens in the midst of burning and pressure.
Yeah.
So I'm learning to find the small joys in everything. When you're struggling to walk down the street, there's a small rose that is growing there,
Okay.
When you sometimes, like there are little things in every corner, I believe.
I know we've started a bit hard.
Yeah, very hard.
But we've broken the ice.
Yes.
Now I'll just ask you, who is Gakeesi?
Gakeesi is a young man who believes that there is so much more beauty to discover in life. There is so much to experience, and there is so much that can be done. Essentially, I would condense my own personhood into saying the beauty of life is in trying, and keeping trying, but also what drives me as a person is the pursuit of a dream, not just a particular dream, but the possibility of dreaming. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that is one way to describe me.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me that you are politically and socially conscious. When did you discover that you were, or do you think you are?
I think I'm pursuing it. I think I'm pursuing consciousness. So the question is multifaceted in answering it, because number one, I grew up in a politically conscious environment. Very early on, I was exposed to particularly national politics, and as I grew up through high school, it only intensified. But I would say that where I interacted with the prospect of consciousness was when I studied theology in South Africa.
Okay.
So within my first 2 weeks, imagine first 2 weeks, I think actually when I went to school was around the time when the land question was still very heated, you know. So there was the issue of land expropriation without compensation.
Yeah.
Why is it that black people in South Africa don't share a lesser portion of the land? You know, those questions around land and land possession. So a certain senior, we're in a group, and he looks at me and says, "My pastor," because we call each other pastor. He says, "My pastor, if you don't have an opinion on the land question, then you're wasting your time." You know. So I wrestled with that for a very long time.
Yeah.
For weeks, I struggled to imagine what I was doing in that place, because that was not what I imagined it to be. Until I started reading certain theologians, I started reading certain philosophers, certain people within the confines of consciousness, and particularly black consciousness, and even the story of Jesus itself.
Yeah.
Because Jesus himself is in many ways portrayed as a revolutionary. So the question of consciousness from there became a priority of mine, to say, okay, particularly within the context of Botswana, what does consciousness look like? Is it just saying, I know what's happening, I know the news, or I understand what the fiscal patterns, or I've read the budget strategy paper? What is consciousness? So the reason why I say I'm pursuing consciousness is that I'm still asking the fundamental questions that I believe would inform what it means to be an African person, particularly within our particular context where we are now.
Okay, so do you believe that Pan-Africanism is still relevant, or is it just romantic nostalgia?
I think Pan-Africanism first must be defined. The reason I'm saying this is actually yesterday I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was saying I struggle with the notion that Pan-Africanism means a borderless Africa. You know, it's beyond that, and I think such an understanding is somewhat reductive, for lack of a better word. It's not just about one currency and one this and one that. I think Pan-Africanism, firstly, in our particular context, is number one, realizing what our history is. So accepting that we went through, or we experienced, a colonial interruption, but also we experienced across the continent inhumane colonial societal norms and notions, fundamentally, that Africans are less than human. Once we accept that, I believe we need to reclaim who we are, looking beyond colonialism, to say, what was it that our forefathers or even our ancestors were developing in developing African societies? But also we need to redefine what being an African is. You know, what an African economy looks like, what an African society looks like. So in that regard, I would say that Pan-Africanism is very relevant and very necessary, because it is what informs our heritage. You know, I mean, I should be able as an African to tell you what it means, or what certain words mean, or what certain behavioral patterns mean within our society, or what certain landmarks mean. You know, but because our education system has not concentrated on a Pan-African ideology, even regionally,
Yeah.
You know, understanding that certain tribes have moved from this point to this point to this point, which means that certain tribes are linked to this country and that country. So we must admit that we are related across borders.
Yeah.
You know, but the point being that because we haven't experienced that locus or that location ideologically, we have departed from ourselves. So Pan-Africanism for me would mean a return to first our heritage and identity, but also establishing a future that is true to us. So it is still very relevant.
Yeah. So how does colonial thinking shape the way we view success? Does it affect the way we see success?
Yes. So now I'm thinking philosophically, but this is an example.
Yeah.
Particularly in Southern Africa, but I think this is an idea that can be shared by many Africans. There is a term that we use as Ubuntu.
Yes.
In Botswana, we call it Boto. And this philosophy is basically described in English, we are, therefore I am. So African personhood stems from communality, which means that success could be defined within the context of, number one, communal prosperity and communal progress. Now, when the colonial interruption happens, what then happens is within the context of spirituality, personhood, emotion, mental faculties, and everything, even physicality, humanity is then defined as the person in isolation. You know, so one's morality stems from themselves, one's personhood stems from themselves, and everything stems from this one person. Therefore, success is within the capsule of oneself. So when we think success, we think of it as, I need to be the best this, I need to be the best that, such that even after or once we reach a post-colonial time, a lot of us want to be the first black this, the first African this, the first Motswana this, which is not to reduce that accomplishment or negate it, but the very idea of what success is for an African has fundamentally changed. So we've moved from more of a communalist, I don't want to say communist or socialist,
we have to be careful.
We need to be very careful there. But more from a communalist relational paradigm to a more capitalist consumerist paradigm, to say, what can I accumulate, what can I accrue, what can I put in my name, that upon my death I can say, this is what I have done with my life, you know. So yes, our idea of success has changed. I think one factor particularly would be the colonial interruption. Yes.
Well, from the answer you've given, it's made me think, what does it mean to be a young intellectual in Botswana? I think that's a fair question.
That's a hard question. It's not fair. I think we must admit in many ways, and I don't know if this would get me into trouble, but I've read particular articles at I think they're just mixed up in my head. But one of the writers I have consulted is Professor Bulawa.
Okay.
He he incidentally is a member of the Botswana People's Party, but he writes and postulates, among others, that when independence happened in 1966 in Botswana, we inherited the systems that were colonial, particularly the education system. And unfortunately, the education system at the time suggested that the Motswana was subhuman, right? Or the African was subhuman, such that even in terms of filling public service, Botswana or Africans actually, were trained to be employees to fulfill a particular government mandate. And there were two reviews or commissions actually, which were particularly looking at the education system, and there were no fundamental changes, such that you realize that the education systems that we have actually speak to, they still train people to be employees. But not only that, they still train people to think within particular ideological frameworks. So the role of the young intellectual within that context, whether it's in STEM or social sciences or humanities or whatever space, I believe would then be, number one, to question and critique the systems that are there, to investigate, to remember, and to postulate. So I think a young intellectual, a young African intellectual, particularly within the context of Botswana, has to, number one, look at the systems that are set up, particularly historically, look to history and remember history, even the history that we want to forget. Interrogate, investigate possibilities, but also postulate and say, we could build a better Botswana in this way. And so I think the fundamental thing is remember who we are, but also contribute to who we could be.
Interesting. Now, what I was thinking when you introduced yourself, you mentioned that you studied theology.
Yes.
One might ask the question, why theology in this economic climate and with so much political unrest?
Yes.
Is there a role for that kind of study, or theologians?
Okay, why theology? I think for me, what pulled me into it was the pursuit of bettering the lives of other people. As I studied theology, that idea was molded into something I did not expect. In that, so I'll answer the second question also in this way. There's a particular, as I got through like year 2, year 3, year 4, there's a particular tone that I started adopting in my term papers, particularly. There is one, I believe, or across subjects, I would suggest fundamentally that whether we look at the person of Christ, of Jesus Christ, or some of the writings of Paul, or even in the Old Testament, we could see that God is interested in the social policy that affects his people. So when he frees them from Egypt, he tells them to rest. Imagine from an economy where there were slaves and there were tools where they did not rest. Suddenly they are relational. They come into a relational economy where they are seen as human beings, and they are afforded rest. And in many other ways, I mean, Jesus himself, he goes into the temple, he finds people trading in a place in the temple where the Gentiles should have had space to worship. And that was exclusionary, that was exploitative, because people would sell animals that would be sacrificed, particularly to the poor. So Jesus turns tables there, and he gets very angry because they have turned the temple into a place of exploitation. So where would the place of theology be? In South Africa, there is a document called the Kairos document. For me, that was a turning point in my own theological development, because this is a moment in South Africa's history when theologians, black theologians in South Africa, took what the apartheid government said, particularly within the context of faith, and reimagined it from a lens of liberation. So they looked at the biblical text through the lens of the black sufferer and the black liberation practitioner. So even today, I believe that theologians have a place in imagining the possibility of a free society, of a progressive developmental society, but also a society that is inclusive and sees other humans as humans, fundamentally. You will see that note across. I mean, Jesus heals people and he sees them as human. He brings dignity, you know. So issues of land, of labor, of justice, across the board, are found within the confines of theology.
So are we then safe to say that looking at reality,
Yes,
faith should challenge power,
yes,
but unfortunately sometimes it seems to protect it?
yes. There's actually, I'll give an example, even though it may be controversial. In places like the United States, you have the rise of what we call Christian nationalism, where people would come to the state with tones of Christian power. So it looks at God as this powerful being of conquest, you know, and many other descriptions that we could place. That is dangerous, because we find a rise of people who want to oppress people in the name of God, you know. And we can debate it with other people all we like, but fundamentally, I believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel fundamentally of liberation. You know, it is a gospel that speaks to refugees and all that. Therefore, like Jesus, we must be able to stand against power itself. It doesn't matter who the power is, but power is, there's actually one, there's Justice Kidingake, a very prolific judge, who I respect very much, says we must be skeptical of power. And so within that context, I believe that faith itself must critique and be skeptical of power in whatever formation, such that even God himself can stand against kings that he has appointed. You know? So I believe that faith generally, but Christianity in particular, because I have a bit of experience there, must be able to stand against power.
So would you say then that the church has actually failed young people?
Yes, the church has failed.
In what way?
The church, in many ways, has moved from a mandate of mission to a mandate of survival. I mean, in many ways, I do not blame the church for this, because economically and in many ways, survival is necessary.
Yes.
But I think mission, and I'm not saying mission in the sense of go and tell people to come to church, but mission in the essence of the expansion of the domain of the kingdom of God. And when I say the kingdom of God, I'm not talking in the way that the British imperial missionaries did it, you know, but in the way that says the kingdom of God is a kingdom of inclusion, of equality, where every single person is loved and seen as human, right? Instead of staying within safe confines, the church must pursue the people that it was called to. So, in many ways, young people grow up in a system that protects systems, church systems, societal systems, political systems sometimes, and economic and other systems. So the church, I believe should, well, this is part of many other things, I think, but the church should be able to capacitate its young people to think, even if I use this word carefully, but even if we say as radically as Jesus did, you know, and in many ways, the church, in many instances, has aligned with power. The church has protected power. The church has protected perpetrators of injustice. You know, the church has protected, in many ways, the church has protected evil. And in many ways, the church has become a system in itself, which would also need critique. But fundamentally, I would say the church hasn't delivered the gospel of Jesus Christ in its fullness. Am I saying the church in totality is wrong? No. What I'm saying is there are essences that the church has missed in pursuing the gospel, and I think the church must be able to admit that. For example, even in South Africa, some aspects of the church, I mean those who call themselves according to Jesus Christ, has not admitted their complacence in the perpetration of apartheid. And in many ways, the churches in America and other places have not accepted their roles in the growth of injustice in certain domains. So I think in reality, there are many things that we must introspect on.
Maybe one last question on this subject.
Yes.
Can Christianity work together with African liberation? Can these two work together?
I think the reason why we have a challenge is that we work with arbitrary definitions of both. So for me, Christianity is the allegiance to the kingdom of God as espoused by Jesus Christ. Right? And if you look at Revelation, the very depiction of what heaven is, you know, streets of gold, gates of pearl, there's food all year round. There is equal distribution of wealth. There is equal access.
Everyone has a mansion.
Everyone has a mansion, you know. I don't want to say that's communist ideology. but it is a society where all people are humans. I think that's the easiest way I can put it. And have equal access to dignity in its diverse aspects. All of us will have land. All of us will have meaningful and dignified labor. All of us will have equal access to not only wealth, but food security. You know, all of us would have access to the very center of divinity. You know, so that for me is what Christianity is, such that we live it even before it comes. African liberation is the pursuit of the human person in the African, right? We need to revisit. A lot of our history was rewritten to depict us as barbaric, to depict us as subhuman. There's actually a gentleman, I forget his name. He presented at the African Tourism Leadership Forum in Botswana in 2024. He says that in many ways, the architecture in Africa, including your Mapungubwe kingdoms, your Malian kingdoms, many others across Africa, rivaled European architecture. You know, development in Africa rivaled European development. So in many ways, our own history was rewritten. So it's African liberation is the pursuit of truth and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
To say who are we, what has happened to us, but also how do we rewrite that history to develop a better future?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would not be too much in contravention with what Christianity truly is.